I'm Jessica, turning 32 years old. I've been married to my husband Ronald for 4 years now, and we're currently living with my in-laws. They run a restaurant, and while Ronald works outside, I quit my job to help my in-laws with their business on a daily basis. In fact, it feels like I'm the one running the show most of the time. I'm involved in everything from securing ingredients in the early morning to doing the prep work and serving customers. Working late into the night, my fatigue started to accumulate. But my in-laws never let me rest, and I'm out working almost every day. The regular customers even started to worry about me. One day, my younger brother James announced that he was getting married to his longtime girlfriend Sarah. Although they're still young, they're both mature, and my parents have accepted them. It felt like they were already part of the family, so I was thrilled as if it were my own wedding. The invitation to the wedding is still to come, but they asked me to attend, and of course I told them that I would. But there's a problem. It's whether my in-laws will allow it. Since I'm technically an employee, I thought I might have some paid time off, so I decided to negotiate for 3 days off. Excuse me, can I talk to you for a moment? After closing the restaurant and finishing the final check, I approached my relaxed in-laws at home. Ronald, who had just returned from work, was there too. "What's up?" The three of them looked at me as if I was an intruder, and Ronald asked with a big sigh. This atmosphere is suffocating for me. I have my brother's wedding in 2 months. I'd like to take about 3 days off for it. Huh? You think you're in a position to take time off? My mother-in-law glared at me with a devilish look as soon as she heard that I wanted to take a break. Despite feeling intimidated, I mustered up the courage to nod. I should have some paid time off left, right? I've never used it. I'd like to use it. So you want to take time off and still get paid? But if I don't, you wouldn't let me take my regular days off if I took time off this month, right? How cheeky.
Let her take time off. It's not a big deal.
The already tense atmosphere seemed to get worse, but then Ronald, my husband, tried to calm my mother-in-law down. I was surprised that my husband took my side, and I looked at him with wide eyes. Then he was grinning at my mother-in-law. Perhaps sensing his mood, my mother-in-law also gave a wry smile, and then she easily agreed. I wasn't sure what was going on, but I was happy to get the time off and felt like jumping for joy on the spot. On the day before the wedding, I prepared to stay at my parents' house for 3 days and left early in the morning. My in-laws and husband were still asleep, so I just left a note saying I was leaving. Then I drove to my parents' house. It's not too far from my in-laws' house to my parents' house. It's about an hour's drive. I was excited to see my parents, whom I hadn't seen in about 4 years. I'm home! Having left my in-laws' house early in the morning, I arrived at my parents' home earlier than planned. Even though I knew my parents would be awake, I tried to enter the house as quietly as possible. As soon as I stepped inside, the faint smell of breakfast tickled my nose. Oh, you're early! My mother popped her head out from the living room, spotted me, and immediately rushed over. Yeah, I left there early. I left my suitcase by the entrance, took off my shoes, and stepped further into the house. My mother, clearly delighted, took my hand and led me to the living room. Seeing her face filled me with a warm feeling of truly being home. Upon entering the living room, I found my father already awake, and my younger brother James, sitting at the dining table. As soon as they confirmed my return, both of their faces lit up with joy. After all, it had been 4 years. I was overjoyed to see my family again. After that, the 4 of us gathered around the table and had a long chat. James talked about his girlfriend, what kind of wedding they were planning. Seeing James' love-struck expression while he talked about her made me feel warm inside. I was asked about my in-laws' house, but I felt that it wasn't a happy topic to discuss at such a joyful time, so I deliberately chose not to share anything with my family. The following day, the wedding ceremony took place. James's bride was stunningly beautiful, and this ceremony was so lovely that I was almost moved to tears. After successfully going through the whole day of the wedding ceremony and reception, we returned home. Despite the fun we had, we were quite tired and soon fell asleep. The next day, even though I was supposed to return to my in-laws' house, the joy of meeting my family after such a long time, and the desire to spend more time with my new sister-in-law, made me wish to stay one more day. I knew my in-laws and my husband Ronald wouldn't be okay with this. But it was a time of celebration, and I thought they might let it slide just for one more day. So with the thought of enjoying more family time, I decided to take a chance and call my mother-in-law. To be honest, I was scared. I didn't know what she would say or if she would even agree. I distanced myself from my family to make the call, and for a moment, I just stared at the phone, but eventually I dialed her number. After a few rings, I heard my mother-in-law's voice. Hello? When are you planning on coming back? You better come back soon. The first thing I heard was a clearly irritated voice. Could I stay at my parents' house for just one more day? Despite feeling uncomfortable with my mother-in-law's words, I timidly asked her. My mother-in-law sighed heavily after hearing my words and went silent for a while. That silence felt unbearably long to me. Just as I was thinking that it was impossible and I should start preparing to return, I heard a snicker from my mother-in-law over the phone. You really only think about yourself, don't you? You don't have to come back ever again. What? I was speechless at her unexpected words. Then my mother-in-law, still laughing, said, Why don't you just divorce Ronald? We don't need a useless daughter-in-law like you. And it seems like Ronald doesn't need you anymore either. What does that mean? I asked my mother-in-law, unable to understand what she was saying. Laughing, she told me to figure it out myself and hung up the phone. I wondered if she really meant what she said, and as I looked at my disconnected phone, I decided to contact my husband, Ronald. Hello, what's up? Judging from Ronald's voice, it seemed nothing unusual had happened. I'm sorry for interrupting your work. I just called your mom and asked if I could stay at my parents' house for one more day. What did my mom say? She said I don't have to come back, and she also said we should get a divorce. She said you don't need me anymore. I told Ronald honestly what his mother had said when he asked me. I couldn't believe he would think such a thing. I thought his mother must have said those words lightly out of irritation because I wasn't coming back. However, Ronald fell silent for a while after I spoke and then sighed heavily.
Well, I didn't want to have to say this, but I want to break up with you, Jessica.
What? His unexpected words left me in shock, as if time had stopped. We've been married for 4 years, and it's not like I hadn't felt that our love was gone, but I had put up with Ronald's parents to preserve our life together. Why? I asked, trying to hide my agitation, to know why he felt that way. My hand was trembling, and my heart was pounding. Depending on his reasons, it might be possible to fix things. If there was something wrong with me, I could change. Even if the love was gone, I still wanted to be with Ronald. I prayed from the bottom of my heart that Ronald's words would be something we could fix.
The thing is, there's someone else I like.
Oh, it's over. Anyone would know that hearing the words someone else from Ronald meant our relationship couldn't continue.
Well, that's it then.
Ronald hung up before I could respond. I stood still, unable to do anything, not even cry. What's wrong? After what seemed like a long time, my mother came over with a worried look on her face. When I looked at her, I saw my father peering in from a little behind her. No, it's nothing. The divorce wasn't final, and I didn't think it was appropriate to discuss it on such a happy day, so I tried to put on a smile so my parents wouldn't suspect anything. My mother seemed to sense something was off, but she didn't say anything more. After that, I spent a fun time not thinking about what my mother-in-law or Ronald had said, partly because my brother and his wife had come over. Rather, it felt like I was forcefully putting on a happy facade. My parents, my brother, and his wife all went out, laughed a lot, and talked a lot. I might have been desperately clinging to everyone, not wanting to be alone. My brother and his wife seemed to suspect something was up. Jessica, are you going back tomorrow? We all went to a cafe, and while our parents were ordering, my brother and his wife and I sat at a table. Well, I honestly didn't know if I could go back. That's why I couldn't answer right away. Are you okay? You seem to be faking your cheerfulness today.
Yeah, it's odd, isn't it?
I knew my younger brother and his wife occasionally gave me worried glances. That's why I can't deny it.
Is something wrong?
My younger brother has always been kind. Whenever I'm feeling down or anxious, he's quick to notice and offer words of comfort. To outsiders, it might seem like he's a big fan of his older sister. Nothing's wrong, I reply, forcing a smile. But James and his wife keep staring at me. I feel uncomfortable under their gaze, as if they could see right through me. What's with the staring contest? At that moment, our parents returned to the table with drinks. Perhaps they find our behavior amusing, as they both wear gentle smiles. Taking this as a cue, James and his wife break their gaze from me, assuring our mother that everything's fine, and the conversation picks up again on a different topic. But the lively atmosphere quickly fades. Suddenly, the ringing of my cell phone emanates from my purse. I pull out my phone, and there on the screen is the name of my mother-in-law. When I don't answer right away, everyone falls silent and turns their attention to me. It's from my mother-in-law. I'll step outside for a bit. Why not talk here? Why do you need to go outside? As I attempted to rise from my seat, my mother took hold of my hand, restraining me from standing up. Her face did not reflect the gentle mother I knew, but displayed a stern expression instead. All right. Hello? As soon as I answer the phone, my mother-in-law's laughter rings out. So, Ronald is divorcing you. That's hilarious. Let's talk about this when I get back home tomorrow. Due to our close proximity, my mother-in-law's voice can be heard by my parents. I try to tell her that now is not the time to discuss this, but she doesn't seem to want to stop talking. Good riddance. You've been living your married life blissfully unaware that Ronald was cheating on you. You were never good enough for our family from the start. Oh, I feel so relieved now that you're gone. Ronald said he'll send the divorce papers. So don't bother coming back. We'll send your things later. With that, she hangs up. Cheating? I froze on the spot, phone in hand. I was shocked when I heard he had someone else, but to learn that he was cheating on me? It's devastating. What was the point of all the time I spent trying to please my in-laws and my husband? As I ponder this, I can't stop the tears from flowing. Jessica. My parents and James's couple probably heard everything. My mother-in-law's voice is too loud, so even at the lowest volume, anyone close by can hear her. I can't make any excuses or show a smile, so I just look down.
What just happened?
My father's quiet, low voice echoes. As I try to hold back my flowing tears, my mother hands me a handkerchief. I accept it and press it to my eyes, the faint scent of my mother's perfume reaching my nose, further stirring my emotions and causing my tears to flow even more.
I thought I heard something about cheating.
I can tell the atmosphere has instantly frozen over. I don't dare look at their faces, but I can imagine their expressions of shock. The day after my younger brother and his wife got married, his older sister announced her divorce. I'm sure everyone was stunned. As I was thinking about this, I felt a warm hand placed on my head. Slowly lifting my face, I followed the edge to see my mother, her expression teetering on the edge of tears, looking at me. Don't cry. You've done well. You haven't been home for 4 years. After this, she shared everything she knew with me. Apparently, she had been worried about me not coming home once since my marriage. She had called my in-laws, asked her friends to visit my in-laws' store to gather information. She had heard about how I was severely worn out, and how the customers secretly talked about how my in-laws were treating me. During her calls, she was told harsh things like, "She's not here right now," or "Your daughter's incompetent." When my mother told my father about how I was being treated, he also seemed to have considered bringing me back home once, but they decided to wait until I asked for help. I had no idea my parents knew everything. I was so embarrassed. I couldn't even look at them. What awful treatment! What's that about? My brother's wife, hearing the story from my mother, was quietly angry. Her face flushed red. I thought you looked worn out. But, so that's what it was about, Jessica. You don't need to go back there. Let's get some alimony and split.
That's right. No more crying.
But just getting the alimony and leaving feels wrong, right? We need to make them understand how much Jessica suffered there. Upon saying this, my sister-in-law showed a defiant smile. When I apologized, saying I didn't need to do anything, and that I was sorry for the situation, my brother told me that I didn't have to apologize, and that he was furious about how I was treated. For some reason, they both left, saying they could handle it. I stood there, dumbfounded by the whirlwind departure of James and his wife. My parents gave me a wry smile and warmly welcomed me to live at home. Several days later, an envelope addressed to me arrived from my in-laws. It contained divorce papers, already signed by my husband. Feeling a sense of sadness, I signed them and submitted them to the city hall the next day. With that, I became officially divorced and single, but an unexpected event occurred the following month. I was looking for a job near my parents' home, but was having difficulty finding one. As I was pondering what to do, my phone rang. The call was from my ex-husband, and when I answered, he seemed very angry.
Hey, what the hell have you done?
This was the first thing my ex-husband Ronald bellowed when I picked up the call. Before I could figure out what he meant, he shouted again.
Since we got divorced, not a single customer has come to my parents' shop. Suppliers are saying they want to end their contracts. It's your fault. My parents are struggling because of you.
I had no clue what he was talking about. I couldn't think of anything I had done to cause this. What are you talking about? I haven't done anything.
Don't lie. Who else could it be but you?
No matter how hard I insisted it wasn't me, he wouldn't listen. He even said, if we couldn't resolve this over the phone, he was going to come over with his parents. I pleaded with him not to come, but he told me to prepare myself and hung up. I rushed to my mother and explained the situation. She seemed calm and started making a call. I was getting frustrated at her nonchalance, not knowing what to do. It was just my mother and me at home. I couldn't bear the thought of something happening to her. I had to protect her. I went to the kitchen to look for something that could be used as a weapon, but my mother stopped me. It's all right, she said, and suggested we calmly wait for Ronald and his parents as she started preparing tea. A few hours later, Ronald and his parents arrived at our house. All three of them were quite angry, glaring at me with intensity.
Don't mess around.
Without a greeting, my ex-husband Ronald tried to lunge at me, but my father-in-law held him back.
I apologize for our sudden visit.
My father-in-law gave a polite nod to my mother. In response, she smiled warmly and invited them into the living room. I was terrified to let those people into our home, but I felt like I had no choice but to trust my mother. She served tea to everyone, and despite their continued glares, she asked my in-laws and Ronald to wait a little longer. A silence fell over the five of us. What felt like hours were probably only a few minutes. Not knowing what my mother was thinking made me anxious. Just then, the sound of the intercom echoed through the house, and before my mother could answer, the front door opened and someone walked in. When I turned to look, the door swung open with force, and there stood my younger brother and his wife, both with stern expressions. Ronald and my in-laws were taken aback by their sudden appearance, completely clueless about what was going to happen. I was just as confused, not knowing what to expect.
Sorry to keep you waiting.
My brother, wearing a suit, took a deep breath and sat next to me, followed by his wife.
What's this? Bringing out your little brother?
Ronald snorted dismissively, shooting a condescending glance at my brother.
My mother informed me of your visit, so I hurriedly prepared for this. You wouldn't believe how long I've been waiting for this moment.
With that, my brother placed an envelope on the table and started pulling out several documents, among which were some photographs. Curious, I peered over and saw the topmost paper labeled Investigation Report.
Ronald, you've been having an affair, haven't you?
At my brother's words, Ronald's eyes widened in shock. But my brother didn't stop there. He had apparently gathered evidence of Ronald's infidelity.
We have all the proof we need. We've also obtained testimony from the woman you cheated with. Therefore, on the grounds of adultery, we will be seeking damages.
At my brother's words, everyone but my mother and my brother's wife, including me, wore surprised expressions.
What are you talking about? We're already divorced. Aren't you aware? Even after a divorce, if evidence of adultery committed during the marriage is found, damages can be claimed.
With a smirk, my brother left Ronald speechless.
Enough of this. We're here to discuss what this woman has done. She's disrupting our business. She must have spread false rumors to our clients.
Unable to hold back any longer, my mother-in-law stood up, pointing at me and shouting, with such force that I had to back away. I will address that matter. My sister-in-law, as if she had been waiting for her turn, started to speak with a smile. I apologize for the late introduction. My maiden name is Sarah Brown. My father is the owner of Brown's Diner. In fact, although Sarah was not the heir because she married my brother, her father was a top business owner of a well-known restaurant chain in the U.S. recognized by many corporations. In other words, she was a CEO's daughter.
What did you say?
The first to react to Sarah's introduction was my father-in-law. Turning towards me, he blanched and shouted,
"Why didn't you tell us?"
"Was there a need to tell you?" Upon hearing my response, my father-in-law seemed to crumble on the spot. However, my mother-in-law was still in the dark, continuing to glare at me.
"What's this Brown business?"
"Oh dear, for a business owner not to recognize the name, that's unfortunate." Sarah cast a pitiful glance at my mother-in-law, who was now turning a darker shade of red.
"What's going on here?"
Asked to explain, I had no choice but to answer. I owe a lot to Sarah's father. He introduced me to suppliers and taught me how to manage the business. Without him, I wouldn't be able to survive in the restaurant industry. Upon hearing this, my mother-in-law finally seemed to understand and sat down drained of all of her energy. "I've done some research. It seems that you, Jessica, were the one managing the business all this time. The good reputation with customers all thanks to you. Even the suppliers were willing to work with us because of you. Without you, they see no reason to continue." Sarah continued to speak, grinning from ear to ear. According to her, just days after I stopped coming in, our regular customers said there was no point in coming if I wasn't there, and they stopped showing up. The same went for the suppliers. They had been willing to work with us because I was there, but they didn't want to deal with my in-laws' restaurant without me, and so they withdrew. Sarah's father found out about all this, and with Sarah's appeal, decided not to help anymore. In other words, my in-laws' restaurant was abandoned by everyone, customer and industry peers alike. "If only you had appreciated Jessica, none of this would have happened." Sarah's face was full of joy as she chuckled to herself. I shuddered at the thought of what happens when you anger Sarah. My in-laws were speechless, but my ex-husband wasn't ready to give up. He continued to shake as he looked over the documents, and then threw them on the floor and turned to me.
"This is all your fault,"
he shouted, attempting to strike me, but my brother stepped in.
"Are you still not done?"
To my ex-husband, who had clearly lost his mind, my brother had a stern look on his face as he calmly said,
"I won't forgive you for cheating and treating my sister so poorly."
With that, my ex-husband laughed derisively.
"What can you do? Have you forgotten? I was your brother-in-law, even if only for a short time."
With that, my brother took out a business card he had hidden in his breast pocket and showed it to my ex-husband. The card indicated that my brother was a lawyer. He was affiliated with a well-known law firm, usually dealing with criminal cases, but occasionally he would represent people troubled by issues like infidelity. Seeing the card, my ex-husband realized he had lost and quietly sat down. "I think we're done here. Please leave." My mother spoke to my exhausted in-laws and ex-husband, standing them up and ushering them out of the house. Then she said to me, "Well done." Later, I found out from a friendly local restaurant owner, who had been kind to me during my marriage to my ex-husband, that my in-laws were unable to continue running their restaurant and had to shut down almost immediately. My ex-husband had been exposed for his infidelity at work. His reputation had fallen, and he had been forced to resign in disgrace. They moved away after that, so I don't know the full details, but they said it's likely going to be a tough life from now on. I was able to receive alimony from both my ex-husband and his affair partner, which I gave to James and my parents as a token of my gratitude. At first, they refused, but when I insisted, saying it's all I could offer, they reluctantly accepted. After that, I was able to find a job and have been spending happy times living with my parents. I owe it all to my family. I am truly grateful. I don't know how long it will take, but I plan to return the favor to my parents, James, and his wife in due time.